Good morning, students. In our previous lesson, we learned about transmission and signaling method, where we saw that with this method, we learned how data can be sent over the transmission medium or the wire in different types of network. However, sending the data out onto the wire or the transmission medium is not enough. So once the data is transmitted over the transmission medium, it is equally important that the data has to reach its intended destination without any alteration or modification in the data. So correct data should reach to its intended destination. So in this today's lessons, we will look at some of the important points where the delivering of data to the intended user is important. So so in order to deliver the data to his intended user or intended destination device, it is very important to specify the destination device. For that, there is a term called as the process called as data addressing. So like when we write a letter to our friends, or maybe we write an email to our friends, or maybe we call somebody. So when we call somebody, it's very important to dial the correct phone number, or write the correct email address, or write the correct mail address when you write a letter or post a letter, so that the letter or the email or the phone reaches that correct person. So similarly, so data also need to be addressed. We should address the data so that the data reaches to its intended device, destination device. So data addressing, it ensures that a network request arrives at its intended destination without any alteration or modification in the data, and then the data has to be accurately delivered to its intended destination or the correct destination. So this is the actual process of networking, how the devices in the networking. So there are lots of devices that simultaneously work together to forward or process the data to the correct destination device. So this data addressing is used or referred to by different networking devices to forward this data to the correct destination. So this data addressing, it can be addressed in different format. So let us look some of the address format of data addressing. The first one is called as MAC addressing. So this MAC addressing, or the MAC address, it is also called as physical address. And this address, they are unique, which is used to identify the device in the network. So it is also known as hardware address or hardware level address. So these addresses are assigned to every networking device by its manufacturer. So whenever the device is manufactured by the manufacturer, they give some address to the device, also known as MAC address. So this MAC address, it is 6 byte long. The first byte, the first 3 byte is also known as OUI or organizational unique identifier. So the first 3 bytes, it uniquely identifies the manufacturer, who the manufacturer is. And then the remaining 3 byte, also called as universal LAN MAC address. So the remaining 3 byte, it uniquely identify the device, which device that particular the device is. So you can think of as your for example, your roll number in the school, or in your college or university, or in fact, you can also think the MAC address or as your CID, your citizenship identity card, which will help to identify that particular person. So no two person will have same CID. So each one of you will have different CID number. So it uniquely identify a person. Similarly, MAC address is also a unique identifier, which is assigned by the manufacturer. So in here, the first 3, so for example, let's say your roll number, let's say 051880, then let's say 267, then the first one, that is 05180, it represents the year. If it is 05190, then you that particular student is 2019 batch, and if it is 18, then 2018 batch, right? And then last 3 digit, that is 267, it uniquely identifies that particular student, right? So you can think as your roll number, where the roll number is again divided into year and the particular student portions, right? So MAC address, it also represent the first 3 byte represents the manufacturer, and the last remaining 3 byte represents the device. So in total, you have 6 byte, which is 48 bits. So this MAC address, they will remain fixed, meaning it will not change unless you change the device NIC card. So this MAC address they are linked with the NIC card, network interface card, so which is a hardware which helps the device to connect to the network. So whenever you change the NIC card, then MAC address will also change. Otherwise, the MAC address will remain fixed or constant for that particular device. So when you say MAC address, the device will have more than one MAC address. So maybe you're connecting your device through Ethernet LAN, then you will have one MAC address, and maybe your device, maybe let's say laptop or desktop, is connecting to the network through let's say wireless, then you will have another MAC address. Or maybe you're trying to connect through a small network through Bluetooth, then you'll have another MAC address. So your device it is possible to have more than one MAC address. Okay, so now let us look at network address, or also IP address. So another address format is network address or the IP address. So this address, they are the protocol similar to the MAC address, is also a protocol which are used to identify the device in the network. All these address, the MAC address or network address, they are unique. So this MAC address and network address, they are used in different layers of TCP/IP models. So when we look at the TCP/IP model, we will look at each of it, and then we'll understand more. So this address is used to identify the node in the network. So this network address, they include 2 parts. The first part identifies the network. and it is also called as network address. And then the another part, the last part, identifies the node, also called as host address. So you can say that, for example, for Genetic, let's say there are different network, maybe civil network, then EC network, IT network, and so on. So with the network address, by looking at this address, IP address, which is divided into two parts, that is network address and node or host address. So by looking at this network address, you will exactly know that where this particular device is located. Is it in the civil network, or is it in the EC network, or is it in IT network? Then by looking at the host address, then you will particularly point to that particular device. Is this device from the faculty office, or is it from the lab, or is it from somebody's personal laptop? So this IP address will help to identify that particular device in the network. So all these address, the network address, they are mapped to MAC address. So different layers, when the device operate at the different layers, the address that can be understood by the devices will also differ based on the capability of that particular device. So some device may be able to read only the MAC address, and some device may be able to read the network address or IP address. So this address, they needs to be mapped at different layers. So we will learn more when we look at the TCP/IP model in our later classes or later lessons. So the combination of the network address and the host address is called as IP address. So you can say the IP address is a combination of network address and the host address. So network address, it identifies the network portion of the or network where the particular device is located. So unlike the MAC address, this IP address can change constantly or change depending on the environment, the requirement. So unless somebody wants the IP address to be static or fixed, then you can assign it as a fixed. Otherwise, the IP address will keep on changing. So we will also look at this IP address in our later classes, so you will understand more on it, why the reason for the frequent change of IP address, and so on. So this IP address, they are represented in decimal notation, unlike the MAC address. So MAC address, they are represented in hexadecimal notation. So it is of 6 byte, and then it is represented in hexadecimal notation. So unlike MAC address, the IP address, they are represented in decimal notation. So here in this example, 192.168.100.100 is a decimal representation of IP address. So the first portion, that is 192.168.100, it represents the network portion or network address, and then the 100 represents the host address. So IP address is of 32 bits. So in each there is 8 bit of 4 octet. Then, and also that this IP address is it is also known as logical address. Okay. The next one is network name. So we have looked at the addresses format, that is MAC address, which is also known as physical address, and IP address, which is also known as logical address. So these addresses are used to identify the device in the network. So there are plenty of devices in the network, so many of devices in the network, but If I want to connect to that particular device with the IP address, then it would be very difficult for me to remember this IP address. Maybe, for example, I want to connect to the Google web server. So the IP address of the Google web server is 209.85.165.99. Or maybe if I want to connect to the Genic web server, or maybe I want to connect to the RUV web server, or Bhutan Telecom web server. So remembering the IP address of that particular device is very difficult. But with the name, it becomes easier for us to remember. So in order to connect to the Google web servers, instead of typing 209.85.165.99, I can directly type it as www.google.com, which is the domain name of that Google web server. So it's very easy for me to remember this name, google.com or www.genic.edu.pt, right? So it's easier to remember the names rather than the IP address. So that's when the network name comes into the into actions. The network name is a word or a phrase which is used by the user, okay, which makes the user easily recognize the device. So remembering the name is much more easier than remembering the IP address. So in order to make this happen, there are services, naming services, which helps to map the network names with the network address or the MAC address. So in this example, this is the name. So all the devices in the network will have the network name. So this is the network name, 2003 server, the name of the particular device, and this is the full name with the domain, the 2003 server.coursezone.com. So this first 2003 server represents the particular device, and this one represents the domain in which that particular device is. And this is the IP address of this particular device. So 192.168.100.150. So instead of remembering this name, I can remember this one, 2003 server, which is much more easier. So this is made possible by naming services. So let us look at some of the naming services. So they are DNS, NetBIOS, and WINS. So these are some of the naming services which helps to map the network name with the IP address. So the popularly used is DNS, that is domain name system, that is used over the internet to map the domain name to the IP address. So just we saw the example www.google.com. So whenever a person types www.google.com, so this www.google.com will not be understood by the devices, network devices. But with the naming services, it will map in its database. It will have all the domain name and the IP address. So whenever somebody types www.google.com, it will check what is the IP address to that particular domain name. So 209.85.165.99 will be used to send the data over the network. So this IP address will be then forwarded instead of www.google.com. So these naming services will help to map these domain name or network name with the IP address. Okay, so now we have seen some of some of the data addressing to make sure that the data reaches its correct destination. So we saw the physical address and also the logical address, which will help the device to be identified by the correct device to be identified by the packet, is that the data that is sent by the sender. And then we also saw the network address, which helps in identifying the network, and then what is the IP address of that particular host computer. Then we saw the network names, which helps the user to remember the name more easily rather than the IP address or MAC address. Now, so this information, so all the data are sent, all the data are sent in the form of packet. So when the data are sent over the transmission medium, they are sent in the form of packet. So depending on the different layers of TCP/IP model, this packet will be, the term of the packet, the name of the packet will differ. Sometimes it may be called as frame or packet or datagram and so on. So all this packet will consist of, or it contains three parts, that is header, data, and tailor or footer. So this packet, it can be any message that is formatted in the form of packet. So this packet will have header, then data and footer. But then the content of this packet will differ based on the protocol used at different layers of the TCP/IP model. So let us briefly understand what are the content of this packet. So in header, it is made up of preamble and destination and source address. So preamble helps the receiver to, whenever the receiver receives the or sees the preamble data or bits, it understands that it is the start of the next new packet. So it will know that the immediate packet, that the packet that is received is a new packet. Then it also consists of destination and source address. So these, again, the address will depend on the protocol used. It can be either MAC address or it can be either IP address. So source as well as the destination IP address will be attached in this part, the header part. So the receiver will understand from where it is coming, the source address, by looking at the source address, and the destination address will know that when this packet is forwarded by the connecting devices, they will look at this destination address, and then they will know that to which the packet has to be delivered, in which network, or to which site of the network the data should be transmitted, looking at these destination addresses. Then the next one is the data itself, the actual data. It can be maybe somebody's trying to chat, so somebody types hello, then hello will be the actual data. Then the last one is footer or trailer. So in here, it will also contain the end of the file bit, which ensures that the receiver knows that, looking at this end of the file, that this is the end of the packet. And in terms of header, there is a start of the file in the preamble, which enables the receiver to know that it is the start of the packet. So in footer, it consists of end of the file and also error detection code. So this error detection code is calculated by the sending node or the sender. The sender will do some mathematical calculation or operation on the data that is to be transmitted. So this calculation, the mathematical operation is done on this data, and then the calculated the calculation will be then embedded in the footer as a error detection code or error checking value. So this on when the receiver receives this error detection code, the receiver will also perform its own error detection code. So it will calculate the, it will also do the same calculation on the data that's received and then check the value of this error detection code calculated by the receiver with the error detection code that is in the footer that is sent by the sender. So if these both the value matches, then the receiver will assume that the data is the data received is correct. There is no alteration or modification in the data. So this is the use of error detection code to make sure the data is received correctly or not. So this is an example of packet that is being captured by some software capture packet capturing software. So in here, the first address, which is the MAC address, is the destination address. Then the second one is the source address. So in here, this is the first packet. So first one represents the destination address. Then this one represents the MAC address, source address. Then you have the protocol, that's IP4, IP address used. And this one, so all of this one is in the packet that has been captured. So this one represents the error checking value that is sent in the packet. So the source address, destination address, the source address, the protocol, and the error checking value is being attached in the packet. So based on this one, the destination computer will also recalculate and then try to compare and then check whether data is received correctly or not. So let us try this one. We will try to identify the MAC address using graphical user interface. Try to find out the network names, then network address or the IP address for my computer for now. So if you have computer, I would like you all to also check the MAC address, then network address or IP address, and then network name of your computer or device. Okay, now let us try and see the MAC address and IP address of my system through graphical user interface. So in order to do that, go to your control panel, then network and internet. So it will again depend on the type of the operating system that you all are using. For my computer, my laptop, I have Windows 10. So if you have same Windows 10, then the procedure would be same. But even if it is Windows 7 or 8, the procedure would be similar, but there will be any slight differences. Okay, then go to network and sharing center. And here, change adapter setting. Click on change adapter setting. So here I have two connections. So I can connect it, connect through the Ethernet LAN cable or through Wi-Fi. For now, I've connected my laptop through Wi-Fi, so I'll use this one. So both will have the IP address as well as the MAC address. Let me try this one. Click on properties. Sorry, not properties. Okay, double click on it and then go to details. So here, so is the information. So for my laptop right now, I have this IP address 192.168.110.42, and my physical address or MAC address is this one. So currently, the NIC card that I'm using is this one. That is the for wireless. And for the naming services, I have the DNS server, which is 192.168.255.227 as my naming server, naming services. This DNS server, which does the mapping of the IP address to the domain name server, and also my net BIOS is enabled for this laptop. Okay. Okay, so now in order to check the name of my computer or my laptop, so go to your, again, you can go to control panel, or you can directly click on this PC, right click and click on properties. So here you can check computer name, domain and workgroup settings. So here is my computer name. This is the computer name that I have. So you can in fact change the name of this computer. So to do that, you can click on this change setting, and then you can give the name of your own. So this is the name or the network name of my computer. So if somebody cannot remember the name, so I can give name that is easy to remember. Maybe let's say Sonam PC or Sonam IT, something like that, so that the user can easily identify my system in the network. So in order to maybe troubleshoot or connect to my PC, they can use this name. Thank you all.